Caolan Robertson has given a very interesting interview today to LBC about the Starmer-Biden meeting and the enthusiasm that he's found on the street, or the enthusiasm that he used to find on the street for Western support, and in contrast, the anxiety, particularly about a Trump premiership that is now being talked about on the streets in Ukraine. Listen to what he's got to say.
Well, joining us to discuss this is Caolan Robertson, who's a journalist, original founder of Byline Times and director of Betrayed: The Truth About Brexit, joining us from Ukraine now. Caolan, the first thing that I want to ask you is, has the news of this meeting yesterday between Biden and Starmer reached Ukrainians, and how has it been received?
People in Ukraine were super patriotic when I was here in this country early last year for Britain and for America. They would smile as soon as they saw that you were from Britain, as soon as you saw English, as soon as you spoke English, because they were so impressed with the support that the West has rightfully given them. And that mood is changing. I'm here on the Black Sea in Odessa, in the south of Ukraine, and it's changing. People are realizing here that support is waning, and they're seeing that the West is getting nervous, and they're listening to Putin's threats. And it's sad because we were their allies for so long, and we actually have the ability, Britain and America, to allow Ukraine to win, but we're not. I was actually sitting on this terrace here in my apartment overlooking, this is the whole city here, last night, and there was an intense bombardment, missiles landing everywhere. I think 76 drones damaged 20 apartment buildings. There were tracers shooting battery fire into the sky, and the sky was lit up constantly for hours at about 3 a.m. and it looked like the London Blitz. And I stared at it through the apartment window, and I thought, how soon is it going to be before I'm sitting in an apartment in Europe and seeing the same view? Well, that is actually possible if we don't allow this country to win, if we stop listening to Putin's threats. When Finland threatened to join NATO, Putin said that he would nuke the world. He didn't. When Germany said they would send tanks to Ukraine, Putin said he would nuke the West. He didn't. And now, when the West is maybe allowing this country to use the missiles they need to survive, Putin's saying he's going to nuke everyone again because he knows it works. It's a type of propaganda he uses, but it's empty threats. Putin also used to say that he used to put out these videos and reports through his propaganda networks across Russia, Russia Today, showing his supersonic, hypersonic ballistic missiles crashing into London, saying, we will use these in the UK if the UK continues its support. Well, he hasn't even used those types of missiles here, where the front line is barely moving. So they're all empty threats. It's all overly cautious. Even if Putin decided to put a nuke here into Ukraine, within 2 days, with the direction of the wind going into the south of Russia, half of the south of Russia, Rostov-on-Don, would be completely radiated. So he knows as well, the second he would launch anything from Moscow towards Europe, there would be 2,000 nuclear weapons sent straight back, and it would obliterate Russia. He's not going to do it. But as long as we continue to listen to his propaganda, as long as the Sun and a lot of right-wing papers put his statements on the front pages, as soon as he says he's going to nuke us, they put it on the front page and scare everybody. That is Kremlin propaganda. Then this country is going to continue to be failed. All we need to do is allow this country to fire the missiles in the direction they need to go to hit the targets of the places that Russia are sending stuff this way. And it's not into civilian buildings. Ukrainians aren't interested in genociding Russians like they're interested in doing here. It is literally what is required for a country to defend itself. One country fires a missile that way, the other country fires it that way. That's how a war works. This is like America turning around to Britain during World War II and saying, here's all the weapons we've given you, but you can't fire any of it in Germany, and you can't land any of it in German soil. You're not allowed to actually attack the Nazis by air. You can just defend them on your own soil. This is exactly the same thing. It's no different, and it's so depressing, and people here can really feel it.
I read an opinion piece today that said that even if the UK and the US were to permit the use of long-range missiles, in terms of the overall picture of the war, it wouldn't actually make that much difference. I mean, what would your response be to that?
it would make a huge difference, because within 300 kilometers of the front line here in the east of Ukraine are hundreds and hundreds of launch sites of bombers and launch sites of missiles that come into the skies of this country every single day and are crippling the energy infrastructure and the morale of this country. Those would be taken out within seconds if those missiles would be allowed to launch. And that's why Putin is freaking out. And that's why Putin is making these threats. Those opinion pieces are incorrect. This country knows exactly where it needs to hit and what it needs to hit. It has the things that it needs to hit them with, but they're not allowed to physically launch them. The effect of hitting munitions warehouses, launch sites and airports in Russia would be massive. It would take years to restock and rebuild those sites, and it would basically halt this war immediately. You know, they're not going to be firing them into the Kremlin. They're not going to be doing anything extremely dramatic. They're going to be taking out military targets, and that will stun Russia immediately and probably put an end to the war. And it's so easily done. This is, again, a country that isn't allowed to fire back from a country that's firing missiles at them. It really makes no sense.
And how much concern is there where you are of the possibility of a Trump victory? You know, from where I'm sitting, the consequences for Ukraine would be absolutely catastrophic. How much concern is there?
Well, I think that Donald Trump is a fan of Vladimir Putin. He has said this in the past in interviews. So he will go with what Vladimir Putin wants, which is a temporary DMZ in the Donbass, which is where they want to just basically halt everything that's happened there, give it to Russia. They want Russia to keep Crimea over there. And what is going to happen in that situation is Trump gets to, say, oh, I fixed the war, I solved everything. Russia will then spend 3 or 4 years reamassing, restocking all their supplies and troops, and they will do the exact same thing again, because they have been doing this for decades to Europe. They did this in 2014 when they annexed Crimea. They did it in 2022 when they tried to take Kyiv, and they'll do it again maybe in 2030 if Trump gets his way. But all Trump is going to do is appease Putin and buy him time to rebuild his army, and it would be catastrophic. People in this country are terrified of the idea of a Trump victory. Small talk in cafes that I have gets brought up all the time. What do you think of Trump? What do you think of Trump? And obviously I say Trump is a disaster, and people are looking nervous about it. And they're watching the election really closely, because it's live or die for the country here. It's live or die for the people here, whether Trump wins or not. It will decide the fate of Ukraine.
Caolan Robertson, thank you so much for joining us from Ukraine this evening. That's a journalist, founder of Byline Times and director of Betrayed: The Truth About Brexit. We will come to your calls on this in just a moment. You're listening to Natasha